Hey team, good afternoon.
Hi, Alexis, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Been a bit busy lately on Nephew. I'm trying to trying to work out something for R3, but it's not trivial. It's not trivial.
No, no, it's not. Which is by the time we figure out what R3 is, it'll be done.
Yeah, that's and look, well, we started in December, so it's yeah, it's a little bit of a anyway, look, we'll I'll keep pushing and do my best. But I think we got some good stuff happening with you and the working group too, so
No,
I'm
no. I mean,
hopeful there.
I wasn't being derogatory. I was just like, it's one of those things where you have to start at something to get the pipes, moving, right? Get
Yeah,
everything starting to flow, right? So,
exactly. Yeah, but I'm a bit afraid about some of the things happening in SIG too. I mean, even though in SIG 1 we struggle a little bit, I think there is same struggle happening in SIG 2.
hmm,
I'm hopeful that uh, there will be more community members working on things.
yeah, okay.
But anyway, I just noticed that we recorded, so let's be mindful what we say here. I didn't know. The recording start automatically here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right.
Well,
Well,
I think it depends on how you set up your meeting. So a lot of the meetings, I think, the way that they were set up was that they recorded it immediately. Others where you have to
okay.
like sign in, then you have to actually be the host and start the recording. That's why sometimes you see Tal has to do the recording.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I just opened this meeting bridge and I'm hoping everything is taken care of. All right. So I see a couple of people are gathering around, which is great. Uh, I'm just going to send a note to let people know the meeting is starting. Okay, we'll wait 2 more minutes and then we'll get started. All right, we're 3 minutes in. Let's get started. So hello, everyone. This is Monday, March 25th. This is SIG1 meeting. Happy Monday. So today the agenda is as follow. We don't have any housekeeping. Well, although actually maybe we do have a housekeeping, which is about the R3 dates. I'm going to bring it here. I don't think we've yet identified the exact timeline for R3, right? So I talked with a couple of folks. It seems that June or May might be the target month for the release. Of course, it's not a firm date, but yeah, we'll keep working on identifying that date. I wouldn't be too worried about what the date is. Let's keep doing the work that we're doing here, and we'll see. When we get a chance to actually understand exactly the due date for the release. But as we're progressing the work in this SIG, we'll ensure that we're ready.
Yeah,
And
I'm
so
pretty
by that,
sure May and June will be very, very. I'll, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not going to happen in May and June based on what we have.
I have my opinions as well, Bala, but I'm just being a messenger here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
All right, so let's jump for the agenda today. So working group updates, then a couple of, I think, updates regarding maybe KubeCon. If anyone has to say something, get ready by the end of the meeting. I want to open up that. And then I think Wim, on behalf of Eric, added this. I'm excited that I have seen this, so I'll hope we'll carve out maybe a couple of minutes towards the end. Anything anyone would like to add? Okay, so then maybe we can get started with the working groups update. And Tim, I'll hand it over to you to get started. Is there anything that you'd like to communicate?
No,
to the
just
team?
the usual. We've got the use cases in place for that have passed the scoping, right? And this includes Great Cluster now. We're still doing, of course, back in SIG 2. We're almost done. I think we got one more session in my estimation on that. And I think we'll come to conclusion on Create Cluster. But then we have two other ones, Delete Cluster and Register O Cloud. Once we're done with that, I think those will go fairly quickly after we get the Create Cluster set. So, but once we're done with that, we do have some outlining items that we have that's necessary to talk about is that we'll have to start talking about, and that is providing some requirements over to service assurance for how ORAN we might want to use some of the stuff that's coming out of service assurance. And then we also have we get information that OSC does have O1 capabilities now, and so we'll investigate how we might be able to use that to fill out a little bit more of the ORAN infrastructure. Hooking up the O1 interfaces for the network functions themselves. So, at any rate, those would be the next piece after we're done. I suspect that's probably going to be May timeframe.
Right.
And then we'll also then start the process again of, okay, now we're in a crawl, walk, run. We crawled. What do we want to do, to finish up the crawl? What do we do for the walk and the run, right? But I've been kind of just keeping them focused on the stuff that they said that they were going to do for release 3.
Okay, and that makes sense. It's the first spin at going through that wheel, if I can put it that way. So once we have finalized the first round, I think the second round and so on will be easier. Anyway, okay, let's wait, because on this one, I think this is exactly what it is about. Some of the things that Wim want to talk about later in this call. So that's interesting. Where was it going? I had something. Oh yeah, just for folks to know here, last Friday we had a review of the registration of pre-existing cluster user story. So this is not in the context of ORAN, this is more generally, but that user story has been approved by the group, and as we started discussing it, a lot of thoughts came in about the overall management of clusters and how Nefio should attack that. So it was discussed that right now, Working Group 2 is focusing on the Create cluster. We want to make sure not this week, but the week after, we have a joint session to discuss cluster registration with the various interested parties to make sure that we can account for the bigger picture when we design these smaller user stories. So I'll make sure that happens, but I wanted to make sure everybody knows as well that that user story that was contributed by, I think, Ericsson got approved and sparkled a lot of both interest and questions. Any question regarding this or the update provided by Tim on ORAN?
Alexei, this particular cluster registration user story and the work associated with that, which work group does this fall under?
Well, that's
because
difficult.
I was thinking which meeting to attend if I'm interested in contributing something here.
Yes, so it's not tied to any working group, and
Okay.
at this point, that's why we decided in last Friday call to create more of either we are able to use one of the working group standing call to have the discussion. Either we create a one-off call, but right now there is no stream of work happening dedicated for this user story.
Okay, I'm just following. Whatever we decide, I think I would love to participate in this discussion. It's very relevant to something we are doing it internally within TELUS right now as well. So
Yes, and that's
we'll keep an
something
eye
that
on it. Okay.
I'll make sure to keep an eye on it and capture it. And that
Okay.
call will probably happen next week. Karen?
Yeah, I think generally maybe there is a need. I think there is a general sort of architecture evolution working group, which I think the meeting on Friday is really an amalgamation of that working group and the sort of release planning working group, is it not? So I don't know whether we need to make more space for things that don't fall neatly into the buckets of the existing other three working groups, I guess.
We might.
Alexi, go ahead. Sorry.
We might. No, where I was going to answer is we might, but I just don't want to add more meetings at this point. We'll add them if necessary, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
Alexi, if we have space on the RX planning and scope meeting, given our agenda there sometimes gets flexible, I think this would be a good candidate to fit in that meeting.
Agreed.
As it goes with the architectural alignment as well, the plans around us.
So what we discussed last week, and Tim, I don't know if you heard that or whether you were not on the call, but we were wondering if actually the working group 2 meeting would be a good area where we could entertain such calls because of how coupled it is to actually the cluster creation that is happening, and that's to Wim's comment on the chat. So we were thinking maybe we can use Teams call, but at the same time, Tim, I'm taking you here without consulting you before. I need to consult with Tim that we can do that.
Yeah, I don't think that that's a problem, right? Because we're dealing with Great Cluster right now. So, yeah, I mean, if you guys want to do that, then, we can add it in.
Okay, well, thank you. That was on my to-do, and I guess it's tackled. Okay, so then set in stone. Next week, please, Tim, let us have a cluster registration topic to your call and have the interested party joining. And I'll broadcast that widely because
yeah, I think it's the same. It's also I think it's the same people that were doing the Great Cluster. It's Ericsson's.
Yeah, correct.
Primarily Ericsson. So.
Okay, so that's good. Thank you. Thank you, Tim, and I think now it's settled. Okay, so Karen, modeling. Is there any updates that you'd like to share?
Yeah, probably nothing reflected on the issues board, but
okay.
Well, the last couple of weeks we have discussed how we want to represent the sort of the models that we have right now. So we've been trying to put together some tooling and the right level of detail on what we see for how we express the design intent, and then also how we can maybe reverse engineer some of what has actually been designed from the existing models. We've been through a few different tools on that. I have an action now to bring together some worked examples for further discussion in the next meeting. Those weren't ready for the meeting last Friday, so at that meeting we had a more sort of existential discussion around the purpose of the modeling group, what it is we want to achieve, and then what it is more generally we want to achieve within Nefio. I think it was a good discussion around where we overlap with standardization, how we want to interwork with standards, what our philosophy would be around our current models, and then how we want to change it. So hopefully now over the next couple of weeks, we're going to bring, and I think Wim volunteered to bring some material on the principles and the context for the current modeling philosophy and the design choices that have been made so far in order to progress that discussion further forward.
Okay.
In parallel to that, I think Stephen has been running a SDK meeting as well. as a kind of, I guess it falls in under the modeling UX section, but I think that's more in Stephen's bailiwick. I don't know if you want to say a few words on that, Stephen. Otherwise, I can take questions on the modeling part.
SDK related to modeling.
They were both bundled in under the one. I think the UX is covering SDKs as well, I think. So,
Okay.
But in any case, the modeling
the
part.
SDK is hopefully going well. And we folks that are working on pieces so yeah, so we're hoping this is on par. This is actually something that I guess we have slightly high confidence to get into L3.
Okay. Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up, Kieran. So first the updates, and I'll hope we'll, I have actually a deliverables that I'm expecting working group to come out with for R3. I'll share that in a minute. But I'll hope that the more philosophical discussion on the purpose of of modeling is going to be properly ironed out, because this is, I think, key for us to properly maintain and modeling, not necessarily in the sense of a 3GPP kind of model, but more in the sense of a KRM kind of models. So that's good. Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
And Stephen, on the SDK, actually, it's been completely falling off my radar. Although I know there is a lot of effort happening, and so I've been looking back and forth at some of the work items. Right. Sorry, it's the previous tab. And actually, I wanted to get maybe an update or understand what's going on, right? So we had two user story for UI, two user story for SDK. I looked at them and I don't know how mature or how. So basically, what I'm trying to get at is what's the scope that you're looking for R3 for SDK and others, and thinking UI, and is there anything
UI.
that
I don't.
could help?
Yeah, I don't have. Well, UI graphic UIs we don't have any. So it's CLI UI.
Okay.
The scope has always been Helm onboarding, so we're not we don't deviate from that.
Okay.
There are details that are actually being sorted out, but then the general scope that this is the most important thing we have to do is be able to onboard existing Helm charts from network function vendors. I think that focus and that purpose has not wavered. It's pretty much on par. Yeah.
And just so I understand, so we give it a spin, right, to what have in R2, and is the intention to automatically generate the reconcile function? Because right now, it gets generated, it's empty, and I was wondering if to what degree of
so
details.
it would do that. So obviously what we built is still reference, and so the purpose is that NF vendors Helm charts unmodified being onboarded on NetFields in an NField context will create a proxy, lack of a better way, operators that would reconcile against our NetField CLDs, and then on the back end it would pull in vendor business logic. So that is the general direction right now. The business logic, there are various things. LIMS K-form would be the dominant one, I guess, that we'll like to support by L3. It depends on where WIMP is. Otherwise, right now I'm writing a what should you call it? A temporary dummy that would work with the Flux Helm controller, which Fiacre and other has already made work with V5GC. So this is more as a reference, and then understanding for network function vendors to get on board the demarcation points of responsibility. What do we cover as the SDK side? What do they have to write on a business logic?
Okay. Thanks. That's super helpful. That's good enough for what I needed. Thank you very much, Stephen. Any question for Stephen or Kieran? All right. Moving on to, I don't know if we have Subhash on the call to talk about service assurance and policy. I know they've been looking into Yeah, improving the user stories based on the NF2 infra. Okay, he's not there. So let's go into architecture and scope and planning. So that's where a little bit of work has happened as well. So first of all, R2 architecture is something we discussed more or less offline. Since the last discussion, I came up with an updated view as seen on the screen. I found it fairly busy, maybe too many components. So that's awesome. Sorry. That's my initial feedback on on my work, but I'm eager to get additional feedback from the team here if this is how to move this forward, right? I'm fine with this if people are fine with it. I know we discussed, and that's where Karen, you chimed in and suggested that we could leverage something called the C4 models, which seems to be look, my internet doesn't work well, which seems to be a set of a reference point to define different kind of diagram that serve different purposes. And so I'm super willing to give that a go if the team wants to have something that is different. So I'll open it up here on this topic. I see Ravi.
Just a quick, when I saw this diagram, one thing that stood out was this nephew actually being shown as a different box, and then you have Porch. Because the way I see it is it's a nephew management cluster, and you have different subsystems within it. Some things like more like the generic ones like Porch, and then there are more kind of the northbound APIs that you call as APIs and so on. But is that something? Is there a reason why we just call this box as nephew, and the other one we just call it as a management cluster? So just trying to understand the picture a bit.
Sure. So the reason I call out, Porch, config sync, and nephew independently is because I think in SIG2, when Porch came in, we decided that it would be its own entity, and we would be able to lifecycle it independently of the various nephew components, and that even maybe someday we could rip it off and replace it with something else. And same with config sync. So these are very much a discrete component that, of course, we rely on them today, but there is an intention to be less coupled with them, although they would be part of the reference architecture we supply. One could come up with, so maybe in R4, config sync here wouldn't be config sync, would be more of a GitOps engine. And we would support config sync, Argo, Flux. That's how I see it evolving. But right now, the intention with this diagram is to showcase what is R2, not what we want it to be. So that's my answer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The other piece I saw this missing is also the use cases. I mean, because there's R2, right? And we do support vRAN and the 5G core kind of orchestration use cases, and some of that seems to be missing here. Do you want to put some use case kind of a layer on top? Or
well, we could, but that's not the intention again of that diagram. So I added on the workload cluster the supported network functions, OAI and 3.5GC for core and RAN. But it's not again to depict the various use cases, it's more to depict the various components that exist in FIO. But it could be used as a reference to depict the various use cases we have, yes. But that's not the intention of the initial diagram.
Sure, I'm just trying to understand scope. Thanks.
Thank you. Isti?
Just a very quick note. In the diagram, in the package variant, you set the blueprint as downstream and the deployment is upstream. Of course, it can work this way, but typically it is the other way around. So the upstream is the blueprint and the downstream is the deployment. That's all.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
It is just a typo. Yeah, it's just
Thank you very much. Yes, you're absolutely right. It's a mistake. Okay, I'll fix this. Okay, so what about the C4 models, right? So C4 and hopefully, oh, it's going to come out this time. So the thing that I like about C4 is that there is one model that is more the system context diagram. And when I look at it, we don't have Bernard in the call, but it looks more like the user's journey kind of diagram, which I think we want to have. And what we have today in that proposal is more of a mix of container diagram and component diagram. So if Karen, I don't know if you're online and want to maybe talk a little bit about this. If there is something that you'd like to suggest or propose, I think that would be welcome.
Yeah, I was hoping to have something to show you today, but I don't. I'll send something maybe in Slack later on this evening. I've done a plant UML variant of the C4 model with the kind of system context view, which basically just shows one big Nefio system and then the things that it interacts with. And that kind of gives you a very high level view. What is Nefio and what is its relationship to the rest of the world? And then when you open up that Nefio box, what are the subsystems within it? Then I would see a box that represents the core Nefio functions, maybe another one that represents Porch, another one that represents config sync. And then without really showing the lower level details within that again, but just indicating the higher level abstractions and then the key relationships. And then I think you would take maybe this is where we can discuss the decomposition level. You would have a diagram for the Nefio part, which breaks that out into its constituent parts. You would have a separate diagram for the Porch part, which breaks it out, and so on. That was kind of my thinking of how that would work for sort of allowing, for instead of having one diagram that tries to represent absolutely every sort of entity and every relationship between every entity, allowing for those different levels of abstraction and then breaking the problem up into smaller chunks and then describing how each chunk works is maybe a slightly easier way to digest it.
That's great. Thank you, Karen. So
I'll try and share something later on this evening on the Slack channel and see if we can trigger a discussion asynchronously on it.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for that, Karen, and thank you for all the inputs. We're converging. We're soon going to be able to claim we have an R2 architecture. Scope process. For the folks that were in the Friday meeting, seems to be almost the same folks as today, so I won't go over it too much. I started creating that user story process for any newcomer or anyone with a user story to understand how to go at it. You know, what are the various steps, what are the various gates, and who is the owner, or where in which SIG is the accountability for these user stories. So I think that was reviewed Friday. We had good feedback. It's not necessarily finalized because we were said that, well, it's difficult to accurately estimate something, but I'm still looking for better wording. Please get familiarized with this because I would like this to be something that we can eventually formalize and vehiculate more broadly when people want to join Nefio with ideas. That's the process they should follow with these ideas.
Yeah,
Any
Alex,
question?
said have an action item to add contents based on the SIG2 meetings and maybe change this a little bit. I will do that in this week.
Thank you, Bala.
Yeah.
Yes, Anna.
I had a question, Alexi, but I think I've looked at the underlying arrows in collaboration with SIG2 and then owned by SIG2 and then owned by SIG3, but my question's already answered there. So good diagram.
Great. Thank you, Sana. Please get familiarized with this, everybody. If there is question, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, maybe I just, Alexi, I think this process is maybe very theoretical because I'm not sure that we are able to produce all the documentation before starting the deployment to be discussed with SIG2 because as far as we are working in Nefio, I think that SIG2 also started to develop and to set up some components without having all the documentation on all the design well defined before starting developing. So maybe this is an ideal vision, but I'm not sure that we can reach it for RIS3. But we need to discuss with SIG2 for
I
that.
agree. You're absolutely right, Eric. Right now, it's the proposal, and this is what we're striving for.
Okay.
Not everything has followed that pattern, but if we start following this on a go-forward basis, then we'll get there. So you're right, there is a lot of catch-up to do, a lot of low-hanging fruits that we need to go find, pick, and fix. But what I want to state is that when we agree, this is what it is on a go-forward basis. So we don't need to go backwards and chase the documentation and so on. So you're absolutely right. This is this is more the process. This is not fixing what is existing today.
Okay.
So yeah, Alexei, I think I would when I make changes to the document, I would definitely recommend one change. Your overlapping of the task breakdown and Git board population. I believe that should be owned by SIG2 in collaboration with SIG1. But we can discuss that. Because I think the SIG2 is responsible for execution. According to me, tasks should be written by the people who are executing it. So I know we have a lot of people in the same, wearing the different hats. A lot of us are in SIG1, SIG2, SIG3 and all. But I firmly believe that since SIG2 is responsible for the execution, that should also be responsible for breaking down the tasks. It could be same people wearing the different hat, but that's what I believe.
Yeah, to that point, Bala, which Git board is that? Is basically I was also curious about. Is it, Alexei, our Git board the one that we are managing, or the one that the R2 is managing, the SIG2 basically?
According to me, that's the SIG2 board. But we can relate to things. We do not have to have the artificial boundaries. If it's a continuation of the board, it's more that the belief that if, let's say we create a sub team for ORAN, and let's say that ORAN team is executing that, let's just assume that execution team is part of SIG2. SIG2 is nothing but execution, right? According to me, that team should be responsible for figuring out what are the things that are required, what are the things that needs to be done, and break down into tasks and stories. In that way, I think the boundary, in my view, it should be it has to slightly change. The wording has to slightly change. Actually, tasks breakdown and Git board population is owned by SIG2 in collaboration with SIG3. Sorry, SIG1 in collaboration with SIG3.
I'm almost thinking, and Bala, I completely agree with you. I'm almost thinking that the underlying owned by SIG1 could slightly drift towards left in that situation, and
Absolutely,
the SIG2
yes.
line drags towards the right. But
Exactly.
in collaboration with SIG2 stays there underneath,
Yes.
which would say that if there is any other support needed, SIG2 is there, but it's owned by SIG2 actually.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bala, on that.
Okay, well, great. So make a suggestion, Bala. Happy to take it forward. All right.
Sure, I will add the contents to that one, like we discussed on Friday, Alex.
Yeah, I think what we discussed Friday is more exploding the development and testing box as well, right? So anyway, let's not talk more about this. I'll wait for your suggestion and we'll talk about it when it's there.
Cool.
Thank you, Bala.
Thanks, Alex.
The last thing I wanted to discuss for scope is R3 priorities. So I took a first stab at it because eventually we have to identify a team for R3. I called it strengthen the platform, get ready for ORAN, or maybe it should be ORAN is here. I don't know. With couple of teams, with couple of actual deliverables. I think the highest priority is stabilize Nefio core, which could be a port to Datto and make Nefio work outside of a VM. I'm highly dependent on SIG2 input here, which I'm welcoming. Yeah, Karen, you have a question?
I just on the port 2.0, I guess is important. but I don't see that as a stabilization activity. I would see that as an evolution activity. I think it would be important for us to stabilize Porch 1.0 in terms of robustness and repeatability of the use cases, and maybe bringing, for example, the code quality metrics being reported in the dashboard and so on and so forth, while putting some focus as well. It sounds to me like we have some opinions on how Porch should evolve going forward. I'm not sure all that's going to get done in release 2, I would have said. In release 3, sorry.
Fair enough. Wim?
Yeah, the similar comment. I think this is things we have to do, but I think for R3, given the time window, it's not going to happen. I think we probably need to stabilize what we have right now and then start working on the next thing. But having this in for R3 is, I mean, if the timeline is what we have in mind, it's too much probably, right? So,
well, what I really want is SIG2 to tell me what this is. Okay, I've been trying to understand what it should be, and so I put my foot in the sand to say that's what it is, to start that debate. So I'm welcome, and I put R3 on purpose here, although look, we said to ourselves many times, we don't need to live in a waterfall world. So I put R3 on purpose because TSC and other people are going to start asking us, so what's R3? And I want us to start having an answer.
I think we did quite a bit of work on actually the evolution of Porch, so there's quite a bit of discussion on it, so it's important. But having it fall inside of that release is, the question is, what do you want? Is it, if it's a document to say, okay, this is how we believe it should evolve, that's probably doable, but then not the actual code probably. So I think that will take some more time.
But what I'm trying to go to is what R3 will deliver. So it might be some Porch evolution. It might be some. It might be also Porch 2.0 design, which is just a document, right? That's also something that I think is beneficial as a release artifacts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct. So I think we should distinguish between, but I don't know, maybe we should use this Friday to debate this list probably. I don't know, because you'll probably the whole meeting with this.
I agree. I agree with you, Wim. And I made on purpose a list so it start, ticking some people's hand and making changes. But I'll open up a couple of questions. So I see, I don't know the order. So I have Tal, then Kieran, then Bala.
I think Kieran, I think it's a stale hand, I think.
Sorry.
So no, it's okay. Thanks, Kieran. So in these two things, right? I mean, I know Alexei, me and you talked about this a little bit. So one thing like you said, I think Porch 2.0 design document proposals, maybe there are a couple of ideas, probably that would be good. There are a couple of things in this stabilized thing I would like to see. I've spoken to you, Alexei, but probably with this forum. So one is definitely we need to figure out what is going on with our end-to-end deployment and reduce the time frame. So that is one thing that we definitely need to do. Right now, the end-to-end deployment take more than an hour. So that is maybe where the bottleneck is, if the bottleneck is in the approval controller or which part of Porch it's actually causing the problem. So I would definitely, that is one of the items that we need to tackle, because that question has come up multiple times by multiple parties, to the sense that there are two things. One is that, and also we're not even providing any insight into what's going on in the system. So maybe that may be also one thing we can do as a part of observability story, to make some things going on in terms of instrument our platform in such a way that at least we tell the user what's going on. So from your next point, make Nephew work outside of VM. I think right now, probably Wim and Tal, Kiran, they can add to this a little bit better than me. But right now, everything works in a VM inside the client clusters, and then we are our end-to-end deployment automation is also based on certain assumptions there. So probably in R3 timeframe, if we can make the deployment work on real clusters, real Kubernetes clusters. Like
sorry, Bala. Yeah, thanks for all these inputs. Please don't go into the details of your input. Just stay high level because time is ticking and we want to go deeper dive Friday. So if you can just give the summary of the various things that you have in mind.
Instead of you saying that instead of make Nefio work outside of VM, can you please rephrase it saying make Nefio work on real Kubernetes clusters?
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, thank you.
Then, sorry, yeah. And sorry I interrupt. I just want to make sure we don't go too deep. But Tal, please, okay. Please, Tal, go ahead.
Yeah, just on the porch issues. So we've already started building the main task forces for R3 and SIG2, and one of them is a platform task force that will be working on porch issues. So we will be working on this. How far we'll go, as people have said, are we really going to focus on this in R3? Probably not, but we already have a PR in that's being reviewed right now to fix some things. We'll make some progress. How far we go really depends on the complete list and how busy people will be, right? I imagine that some people will be on multiple task forces, right, where they can contribute. So, we'll create a bunch of items and we'll try to pick the highest priority ones. Some of them will make it into R3 and some won't. It's a journey, right? So I think parts of it will definitely be in R3. How far we'll go depends, but that's true for everything, for every item, right? So I'm not too worried about having this on the list. I think it's important, if not critical. We have some breaking issues with Porch right now, right? Inability to build it, for example. So I think yeah, well, we might go for the low-hanging fruit. We might try something bigger for R3. It really depends on the appetite of everybody and how much is on their plate. But I have no problem adding this here. I think it's some aspects of it are critical. So yeah, that's my point.
Thank you, Tal. And my intention here is so that list is ordered, right, in terms of priority. So for me, enhance or stabilize Nefio core is the top priority for R3. Of course, then there are other things coming later, but we need a solid base to being able to build anything. And until we have it, I want to make sure we focus on building it. Ravi?
No, mine was not on the item one on the ORAN use case. Are we missing a few use cases here? Because at least we have 3 approved, right?
Yeah, I clubbed them all. My goal here is to be a TLDR. So deploy and reconfigure application, being NF, XApp, or near real-time rig, actually covers most of the use cases we have. And standardized infrastructure management covers registration, creation, and deletion of clusters. So
okay.
Yeah, because I think the work that we're going to do in ORAN for the cluster lifecycle management is going to benefit Nefio as a whole. Of course, it's spearheaded with ORAN in context, but I think it's applicable. I hope that it's going to be applicable more broadly. Hence the reason of me categorizing it that way. But again, open to suggestion. This is just a, I should say, draft.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just good. I would suggest to put it in line with all the approved use cases. Then it makes things clear. Club it, then the people who are the stakeholders might get confused. In a sense.
No, the approved use cases are still listed here.
Oh,
so not,
you have it later. Okay, got it. Okay.
They're not gone. It's
a summary of it, I guess.
My intention is exactly to have like the TLDR. What is Nefio R3? If you recall, SIG2 struggled towards, or I don't know if they struggled, but SIG2 had to come up with what is R2 at the end of R2. Well, I'm hopeful that we can think about what is R3 at the mid R3. The next time we'll hopefully have it at the beginning of R4. So anyway, that's why.
Okay. No, as long as there are details, that's good. Thanks.
It's all about planning. Yeah. Kieran?
Yeah, just to reiterate, I think we should separate enhancing Porch and other capabilities in Nephew from stabilizing Nephew as two separate and distinct activities. And one of them might be related to, for example, whenever Nephew was ingested or onboarded into Linux Foundation networking, there was an exemption, I think, given for certain best practices that have been maybe weren't quite meeting the quality bar. I think we should probably spend some effort on bringing those metrics up. So I think we're at 39%, for example, on the best practices score on the Linux Foundation Insights dashboard. So things like documentation, security, standards, legal, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if we want to make that a formal goal. I think it's something that we should see in terms of building a solid base of Nephew code that then allows us to evolve more deliberately forward.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And right now, this can be a bit more verbose. We'll figure it out later. It's more of a brainstorming. So thank you. And Eric, I see you added on the side in the chat.
Yeah,
LCM.
Yeah, it's about LCM. I think that's some topic we should keep focus on it, because it's very important for us to in the real life of network operation. It's very important to tackle this problem, because it's really a key problem. And I think with Kubernetes and all this KRM and GitOps approach, it's key to demonstrate the potential of such techniques, but we need to demonstrate it in Nephew, and today we are not yet there. I may bring some kind of user story. I don't know how to write it, but maybe for R3, maybe starting with maybe a simple, only requirements, and maybe after we can work on the implementation or some basic use case for the next release. But I think that could be great also to demonstrate that, for example, we can upgrade an underlying cluster without any impact on the network function. Typical use case like that could be very, very helpful for the ecosystem. I can write some stuff on some user story on it. Maybe it's too late to have R3 implementation, but at least if we can have an agreement about what we should achieve for next release, it can be great.
Yeah, and I think it's not lost, Eric. I did capture the LCM topic as part of I call it RX backlog.
Okay, cool.
The reality is we already have way too much for R3. So
that's right.
You know, I just need to be realistic, right? But the topic of LCM is definitely part of the backlogs topic that we want to tackle. And if you want to start contributing user stories or put some more thoughts, please feel free to do so. The work is not lost. It's captured here. I want to make sure it's clear that it's not lost.
And as said, Sagar, I will have a look also on what the user story defined currently in Oran. I will need to check on it. Okay.
Yeah, the reconfigure NF is part of what we want to deliver with Oran use cases. It's a minimal reconfiguration, but yeah, please sync with Sagar on this one. All right, so no more hand raise. Look, time's flying. I want to keep 10 minutes for Wim. So I'm glad it sparked that discussion. That was the intention. So people, please look at this. For us, SIG1, I also came up with 6 deliverables for us that we have to be accountable for. So, you know, an architecture, schema registry or schema modeling, I don't know if the right term, roadmap, user story, sequence diagram, user journey, initial paper on GenAI that we discussed. Everything is draft, team. We have until R3, end of R3 to figure that out. But I want to be proactive on this is going to help us structure and prioritize, and I think we need to do that. So we'll continue the discussion Friday. If there is more input between now and then, please just shoot the the comments in the doc here are being on Slack. The more feedback, the better. Make this a lively document, please. All right, so I'm not going to open up for question because there probably are, and if there are, let's take it offline. Now I just want to wrap up with KubeCon. Anyone was at KubeCon and can share a little bit of feedback on how it was, whether there was some good discussion in the realm of network automation. Okay, that's disappointed. So Wim, off to you. That schema-driven config for Yang. What's that about?
I'll share my screen, right?
Please do.
Yeah, so I think when we did the summit, I said that we were busy with this project already and that we would open source it. So basically SDC is the name stands for schema driven configuration. So it's a project that got open sourced actually 2 months ago actually. What it does, it actually has a component that exposes Yang-based schemas through Kubernetes, through a config server. And it managed that config in a declarative way, right? Towards various targets, which can either be a physical, virtual, or container-based workloads that today have a Yang-based interface. So the southbound protocol of the system, so we support both GNMI as well as netconf. And there are various components into the mix. So this is built to, on one hand, to have very small scale. So you could deploy it inside of a cluster. So it's all of these components. So there is 3 components basically. One is a config server, which basically exposes Kubernetes API. So it uses the aggregated API method because Yang files can be very big, right? So it has that. There is a storage layer that is in here, right, which is BudgetDB. Then there is a separate schema server. So these, by the way, these are all microservices, so you can deploy them independently as a scaled out system. So if you, for example, have a system on which you want to deploy or manage thousands of devices, you could, so you can deploy it scaled out, or you can also collocate all of them together in a single pod. So the system is built to be flexible with respect to that. So there is a schema server, which basically loads Yang schemas. There is a data server, which is basically the proxy between the this system and the device, right? And then there is the cache which holds the data of the system. The reason why this is there is because when we were building this thing, is what we've seen is that in order to build a declarative system, you do potentially quite a bunch of operation to the devices. And so this layer is there to actually offload these platforms of various operations that are not necessarily required to be managed by the devices. So this layer is there to actually make it scalable and not kill these platforms, which are sometimes not, depending on the implementation, not designed to handle this declarative operation at scale. So it is vendor agnostic. So today the schema technology is Yang based. So we plan to do others if needed, right? So we have VNF, so PNF, CNF, VNFs, as well as we have a no-op operation. So you basically can just validate without actually interacting with a device. It's built to be vendor agnostic, although what we've seen is that every vendor has its own flavor to a certain extent. But okay, so that means that we have to add some knobs, right? So it's, as I said, it's flexible in deployment, so you can do small but also big, right? And then it's both GNMI and as well as netconf. The other thing is that that's always a discussion. So some people manage, or the use cases that we have seen for the system is that some people basically build one large config and they want to transact it to the device, which is what I call a full config-based operation. But you can also manage this as a config through config snippets. So the system will merge and transact only the changes towards the targets that are needed. And everything is built in a declarative way. So yeah, so actually I was just looking at an example if you are interested. This is, for example, a CRD so there is different CRDs, by the way. So there is config sets, which is basically you can apply different configs to the same to multiple devices. But in essence, this is the Yang model, but it's actually, you see, so the nice thing is that you can manage the system. So this is like a Kubernetes CRD, right? So it's so you have a selector of the target. There is discovery inside, so there is a way to discover targets. So we can use also services, pods, static IPs, but you can also give it a range, and then it will auto discover what type of devices are there. So you can, so there is various mode of operations there, but I think the most interesting thing is the whole declarative based operation and the fact that the system merges all the changes to it and only applies deltas that are needed to the device rather than always transacting a full configuration and stuff like that. So yeah, so that's kind of it. It was, so there is a talk from Swisscom that they presented this and they actually showed it live in stage. So yeah, it's still early days, so we have to do some more testing, but yeah, the product is, so people can test it if you want. Yes, Alexis, you had a question?
Well, I didn't raise my hand, so Tal, go first.
Yeah, this looks really interesting. Some of us worked on similar things. I know, Alexi, you did too. So one of the challenges, I think, of doing it entirely declarative is that sometimes in the kind of flows, you want to query something first and do something like an if else, or even iterate over a list of interfaces. So there are challenges, and yeah, I wonder like how many use cases this could really handle, and if there's thought of like doing something like that, you know, working with transactions for query. Yeah. You know,
the system is transaction based, so every change that you do is a transaction. So it builds a candidate configuration, it does all the changes. So any change you can, so in our view, of course, there might be a bug, but any change you want to do, it should work, right? So for example, I can show you.
Yeah, go
show
ahead,
you a small demo here, right? So I just created interface 111. If I would basically do declarative and change this to 2 and apply it to the system, right? It basically, you see that interface 1 is gone, and now interface 2 is there, right?
Yeah, my point is more the conditional stuff, right? In the example, like you're configuring a bunch of interfaces, but you might want to configure them dynamically according to which interfaces already exist, right? Some sort of for loop with some sort of expression. So my experience is that once you really make it robust, you create something that kind of almost looks like a template generation or something like that. I mean, it could be great.
These type of things,
yeah,
these type of things happen above the system, right? So here you basically, our view is that, so like a K-form would be a tool to use on top of this, right? So then you can do all the conditional statements and stuff like that. So this tool is basically saying, here is a config that I want to apply to the device, make it happen. That's kind of the goal of this thing.
Yeah, my point is that some of these configs that you apply, you might do queries as part of the transactions, right? Because it's not a higher level system that would find this out, but the system itself needs to find it out, right? You query to see which physical interfaces exist, and then you create some sort of configuration for each of them, right? A for loop.
That's what happens under the hood, right? But what we didn't want to do is build conditional system because you try to do too many things in our view. Because typically the system that consumes you will tell you, so you can query the interface, right? And then you say, okay, based on that, so I would build that at a higher level on top of this. But the querying of the interfaces would interact with the system.
We have 1 minute remaining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, Bella, if you want to go, then I'll go last.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So this is great. Actually, I have a lot of questions. Obviously, we do not have time. I'll ask maybe a couple. So in this particular case, the capabilities of for most of the newer systems that support netconf, there is a feature called netconf monitoring that it's supposed to be, where it advertises its capabilities so that the manager can dynamically query what Yang models a particular device supports, and then it can build a cache and it can expose the API. So in this particular case, do we need to, I assume the CRDs, the capabilities of the system has to be known prior, and then we need to build the CRDs for them prior, and then if there is a change in the particular Yang model, let's say there is a patch for the system, so that the CRD has to change as well. So is it dynamic or is it static like I way described?
So the discovery of the system is dynamic, right? So there is a scheme. So you apply the config to a target, and the target has a schema, right? And so the schema can change, right? And so what you can do is, for example, what we have done so far, if the schema changes and there is a backward incompatible things, you basically have a way to transform the CR towards that thing, and then it will apply that. So it will do that based on the schema on which the target, so it will auto discover which schema the target has, and based on that it will transact the right CR based on the changes that are needed.
So, but if there is a, let's say, a new field was added or removed for from the netconf thing, or something was.
And it doesn't matter, right? Because if your CR,
but that needs to be represented.
It doesn't matter, because if your CR doesn't add that capability, right? It doesn't really matter unless it's a default. But then that figures it out. The problem is changes or deletion, right, of Yang. Things. So those are treated by, let's say, a conversion tool similar to how the Kubernetes API system works. So you have to write a conversion for your thing that takes care of it.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
I need to chime in. We're 2 minutes over, so I won't go with my question. I will rather go with we probably need to have that back next week, Wim, for maybe a 10-15 minutes discussion to continue what we discussed today. So if you're okay, we'll continue the discussion next week.
Yeah,
sweet.
Sure, we can.
Yeah.
Thanks. This is very, very good.
Yeah.
And
very nice.
as Tal said as well, I mean, some of us have experienced that. We definitely are curious where to take this forward in Nefio. All right, everyone. So Wim, thank you very much for the quick presentation. I should have known I should have carved out 15 minutes and not just 10. Next time I'll know better.
Actually, according to me, this requires an hour of discussion, Alexei.
And okay, so everybody have a great rest of Monday. If there is anything between now and next week, Slack is the way to reach out to any one of us. Please think about the R3 priority and scope. This is for me the top #1 priority for SIG1. So with that, folks, happy Monday and talk to you soon.
Thanks, Alexei.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye.